All right, so we're on the final session of the 16 personality types. Actually, we're on the final session of the second module. Okay, we've been doing the second module this whole time. We've talked about cognitive functions, the 16 personality types, and we're going to enter the third module, which is on profiling basics, and basically what you're going to need to know when you are profiling another person, all the technical components. But this is going to round out the system. Now, the polarities, session number 35 is on polarities, and the polarities are something that I'm starting to understand more and more their power. This is a bit of proprietary information. This is something that Personality Hacker's been working on, and it's a work in progress. As we get going, we've discovered more and more about the polarities, but we're also finding ourselves really starting to implement this in profiling. We're starting to implement some questions in profiling, and really, just like with the firm model before, I'm starting to ask more and more questions about the firm model. Like, I had a friend who I couldn't tell if they were an INJ or an INP, so I asked them, do you prefer to be, or what's worse, to be vulnerable or to be wrong? And they said, oh, to be vulnerable, hands down. And I was like, oh, I'm talking to an IJ. And we'll talk about that more when we mention questions to implement in your profiling sessions. But it's that kind of stuff. It's being able to triangulate all these little distinctions. So the more distinctions you have, even though it might feel overwhelming initially, the more distinctions you have, the more tools you have on hand when you're running into somebody whose type is starting to baffle you. So we're going to talk just a little bit about the profiles. We're not going to go too deep into the profile, or excuse me, the polarities. We're not going to go super duper deep, but I just want to give you an idea how the polarities were looking for a slightly different thing. All right, you've got judging functions and perceiving functions. And over on the judging functions, you've got the accuracy harmony polarity and the effectiveness authenticity polarity. So even though there's 4 judging cognitive functions, you can almost see them as 2 coins, okay, with 2 sides. It's almost as if there's only 2 cognitive functions that have 2 components to them, 2 halves that are magnetically attracted. Now, I don't want to confuse you too much by saying there's not actually 4 judging processes, there's only 2. There are 4 judging functions, but they're intrinsically linked with its opposite, with its mirror opposite, and this is what we mean by polarity. Now, if you look at the first judging function polarity of introverted thinking and extroverted feeling, remember, judging processes are about should statements. What should be happening? It creates a should statement because it's got to make a decision to implement something in the world, and that means we have an idea of how things should be turning out. So we end up creating should statements when it comes to the judging functions. And introverted thinking and extroverted feelings seem to be focused on what we should be thinking or what truth is. Is truth socially constructed? Should we be thinking things based on the social consciousness? Or should we be thinking things based on pure data, separated from the social consciousness? Now, that doesn't mean that if you ask somebody, are you more focused on what you should be thinking or on something else, that they're going to know that about themselves. Deeply unconscious. Very, very, very unconscious what this motivation is. However, you'll see people who are harmony say things like, well, I'll just tell it how it is. Well, that's because they are attracted to what they believe is truth. You'll see accuracy people say, well, I don't care who you are. If you're wrong, you're wrong. Okay, that is about truth. What should we be thinking? What is the truth of the situation? As opposed to effectiveness and authenticity, that polarity is more focused on what we should be doing or the actions we should be taking. Effectiveness believes we should implement things based on what works, right? What is going to work in the outside world. Whereas authenticity believes that we should be doing things that honor the individual, right? Like we talked about the Buffalo Soldiers that believe that their action that they should take is based on honoring individual human rights. So the effectiveness authenticity polarity is more focused on the things that we should be doing versus what we should be thinking. Now, this can get confusing because, you know, authenticity might say, well, you have to believe the right thing. If you have the right belief system, then you'll take the right action. But if you notice, having the right belief system lead you to the right action, all right? And you'll see an accuracy harmony person say, no, we should be doing correct things. We should be, if we don't do what's right, okay, if we're not doing the right thing, then how can we ever impact the hearts and minds of people, right? How can we impact what they're thinking? So really, doing and thinking will get you to the thing that you really believe is important. And if it's accuracy, harmony, it's fundamentally what we believe or what we think, right? Truth. And if you're effectiveness, authenticity, the right thinking will get you to the right action. So that's really what those polarities are looking at. And so being sensitive to how people's processes are showing up, being sensitive to what they think is the important thing. Are they saying stuff like, well, I'll just tell it how it is, or if it's the right answer, it doesn't matter who it comes from? They're probably either an FJ or a TP, right? And that helps you nail down two dichotomies. If they're more insistent upon behaviors, actions, how you implement in the outside world, even if they're an FP, or authenticity, that's still a part of it. You would think that would be effectiveness. What should we be doing in the outside world? Or even harmony. What should we be doing in the outside world? But that's actually the authenticity, effectiveness, polarity, which is about ethical actions. Whereas accuracy, harmony is based on socially responsible truth. Okay? That's the polarity. Socially responsible truth versus ethical actions. All right. So that's that polarity, and that's good to have it. That's good to have that on your radar. You won't be implementing that immediately. Just to let you know, this is not 101. Okay, this is not something that you're going to immediately start implementing. This is something that you should have as a kernel in the back of your head, and over time, you'll be seeing how it evidences itself more and more. Now, the perceiving processes are introverted sensing or memory and extroverted intuition exploration, and that's one polarity, okay, two sides of the same coin, versus extroverted sensing or sensation and introverted intuition, which is perspectives, and those are two sides of another coin. Now, the way that memory and exploration work, now these are not should statements, right? These are just how we see the world and what we're choosing to focus on. I don't know if you've ever heard the statement that newspapers can spin information not based on mistruths, but what they choose to report and what they choose not to report. Okay, so what we're choosing to focus on will alter what we end up believing, thinking, learning, etc. And memory and exploration are focused on something different than sensation and perspectives are when they're learning. Memory and exploration are focused on the world around us or infrastructure. Memory is, how is the infrastructure being maintained? What have I always seen before? What do I know based on how I've experienced this in the past? Versus exploration, which is, how do we change the infrastructure? How do we bring novelty? What's new? So people who are NPs or SJs are oftentimes focused on the infrastructure of a situation, either maintaining it and keeping it the same or radically altering it or changing it. Sensation perspectives, on the other hand, has a tendency to be more about information culled from the individual, not information based on what we're experiencing in the outside world, but information based on what's happening here as the instrument, okay? So sensation is about what the body is engaging with as an instrument in real time, and perspectives is about what the mind is understanding. So it's the mind-body connection, all right? And that's why you'll see a lot of sensation or perspectives people in the health and wellness industry. You'll see some memory and exploration people there too, but overwhelmingly people in health and wellness are sensation perspectives because they're focused on the mind-body connection. Whereas you'll see more memory exploration people in positions of government or in positions of, trying to change, say, the school system and how that happens. You'll see other types there too. It won't just be memory exploration, but that has a tendency to be their focus. So when a perceiving process is really interested in infrastructure in the world around us, that might be a clue that they're either an SJ or an NP. And if somebody is really interested in the mind-body connection, right, how that works as an instrument for understanding information, they're probably, not always, but they're probably more gravitating towards being an SP or an NJ, all right? So that's how the polarities work. Again, this is not super simple stuff. This is one more piece of information when you're triangulating. Don't implement it until you feel comfortable with it. And don't be asking people questions initially. We'll talk about some questions you might, bring up that kind of mention these things, but this is something that you should just have in the back of your mind, really kind of thinking about, and then later on when you feel comfortable, you can bring it up. Now, We have a course called, or we actually have a membership program called Profiler Community. We've actually got a couple people who are on the call right now that are in Profiler Community. Kelly is, Dave is, and Profiler Community is a monthly membership site where we bring up profiler tools, and these functions, right, the polarities, are something that I'm personally deeply fascinated with right now, and I'm doing a lot of conceptual work on it as I go, and that's shown up as in profiler tools. So whether or not you join the profiler community after the training certification course, or if you just, you know, are interested in it more and want to check out one of those profiler tools, you certainly can. This is stuff that's being developed over time, so, you know, don't be surprised if you hear me talking about it again in the future. All right, so I just wanted to give you guys that piece of information. Wanted to make sure that you had this on, you know, as a tool in your tool belt. Pull it out judiciously. This is not simple stuff. Have it mull over your mind. See how it impacts you and it impacts the people around you as a control. And then if it is a good source to be able to distinguish type when you're in a profiling session, feel free to bring it out.